Oh, hi, everyone. How's it going?
Hello.
Greetings.
You sneak in when you're not paying attention.
Yeah, I was joined a little early and then I go off and I do something else for a minute and then somebody suddenly speaks in my ears and I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm on a call. It's like waiting to accidentally do something like have lunch in my teeth or something and people be like, ooh. I love that you all use HackMD. I love HackMD. I don't see enough communities using HackMD. It's so good. Such a helpful little tool.
The only downside is we have to remember about once every year to go through and archive it, all our old messages.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, like, it looks like you guys kind of do a yearly process of sort of
Yeah,
archiving these.
and I have no idea how he picked the date on that one because it would make more sense if we just had it per year, but no, it's April to March of the following year.
Okay, well that, I mean, and you just did it, so it's like not so big a file right now because it hasn't been, but I imagine come like December, this is a little much to scroll back.
Yeah, it was getting pretty slow, so I noted the time and said, okay, it's time to go. Let's do it.
Hmm.
We didn't really have an agenda this time, so I went back through the PR list and found a few that looked like they were somewhat easy to work through.
I had an action item to do a poll for you all in the community and use like I was going to use a Slack poll tool to see who all was planning to go to the Utah KubeCon. And then I think I got distracted by the other issue that we had in Slack with it suddenly being consumed in whole over at the CNCF land. So um, I didn't go back to that. So I will retain the action item to send out a poll for potential in-person meeting at KubeCon. And then the other item that had been raised from last time by Mike Brown, the other Mike Brown, was to talk a little bit about the ideas or concept of like a principles or tenets document. I don't know if you want to get into that today or save it for later, but I did not want to lose track of the AI.
AI is a dangerous way to abbreviate that now.
You know, I just realized that after I said that, I was like, that's really obnoxious. I need to stop saying that because that doesn't mean the same thing anymore.
Oh, we're at 5 after we have a handful of folks that have shown up. I think I want to start with a couple of the ones from Introspect since we have Sajay and Tina on here. And the first one I'm thinking of is the clarify the media type syntax, because Tina had a comment on that one that was questioning whether or not we should go that direction. Am I stretching your memory on that one, Tina? He could also just be having his lunch too.
Not having lunch, but was definitely distracted. Sorry.
No worries. Gave me a second to get the screen share up.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this whole one here where we were talking about the different media type versus the artifact type syntax.
Oh,
And
sorry, my microphone's not working.
it's working.
We can hear you.
Maybe your headphones aren't working.
I think he was making a joke.
Dang.
So yeah, the media type, artifact type, we had kind of like a quasi definition before we were pointing over to the RFC, but we didn't completely nail it down to say whether or not parameters were or were not permitted. And so, since you would comment on this one, I figured I would give you a chance to chime in here. Or Sasha, if you've got thoughts on it as well. Wonder, do we have examples in here at all? Changed a bunch of lines, but I don't know if I might have had an example in the test. That might help out
Oh.
this.
The RFC we're pointing to that defines the string with parameters is for a header on HTTP, right? Like specifically for a request or a response on HTTP. Are there any other examples of file formats that have embedded a MIME type like this that might have use cases for parameters or for blocking parameters that have maybe already had this conversation before?
That I don't know.
Does JSON schema references have a definition somewhere?
The JSON schema did. It was broken.
No, I mean JSON schema. The JSON schema are org definitions. They like you point to a JSON schema and that needs to be of a specific media type, or they actually imported by URI, not by media type, right?
Yeah, the JSON schema itself, the version of JSON schema is a full URL or URI in there. And our definition of the media type inside of JSON schema used a regex. But our regex was broken. I think just in case people aren't following what we're chatting about, I'll back this up to the high level view here. You can have a media type like this on the right, which is like a foo / whatever. And then you can put a semicolon and other stuff in there like versions or the character set, whether it's like UTF-8 or something like that. You can put other kinds of fields after this on the end of the media type. There's kind of like extra parameters. And so 4.2 defines this is what you need for a media type. And then 4.3 defines what parameters are. And everywhere in our spec, we had always pointed over to 4.2, but anybody clicking over to read the RFC just kept on reading and didn't see that they went over to 4.3. And so they assumed, well, it's still part of the media type, they can still use it. So we were never clear if or if not that should be possible. And I'm imagining some of the challenges, like the refers API, you can filter on a manifest or on an artifact type. Do you want that filter to be able to go down and have to deal with parameters? What if someone passes a parameter for the character set and the person defined an artifact without the character set, but everything is UTF-8 already? Do we automatically strip that off on the query, or do we have to use that in the query or not? I feel like there's a bunch of problems that come in if you start to say these are allowed.
I mean, against the strict guidance of RFCs, I'm almost tempted to say parameters just make the implementation much harder, both for clients and for services, right? And is there an actual use case to use the parameters?
There was a group that wanted to use it for the version number. They want to start versioning their
But don't we
media
do
type.
that? Do we do that already with plus V1 and things like that already? And
We do it inside the media type itself. They were
Right.
trying to use a parameter for that. And when I saw that, I gave them a recommendation that they would probably see some issues, and they were already seeing issues. I think it was ECR that was already rejecting it from them.
yeah, I'm I think you'll have a lot of challenges getting servers to even understand this media type if you have parameters. And given there's no use case, maybe we could say that 4.2 is the only acceptable scenario. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so this is so there is a version that we give at the top level, right, for the image. So this is a version they want inside the image.
No, inside the artifact type.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I mean. So,
Yeah.
Um,
So you
wow.
have multiple versions of the artifact type with same media type, but separated by version parameters.
No, but this version type. So, for example, if I publish an image :tag, which is the version that humans understand, let's say, for example, and then they want so internally they want another version type for this artifact type. Wow.
This was a version for the artifact type itself. And so I think it was like an attestation format for, I don't know if it was in Toto or something along those lines, where they had a media type for in Toto, but they had multiple versions of that attestation format.
Got it.
And
Okay, so they want to, so they want to version the, I'm not sure about this one. This is.
And everywhere else we've done it like this, where we put like a .v1 inside the media type itself.
Yeah, or a star v1.star.bar, for example, something like that. So yeah, there is a way to get around this. For me it is a no. It just complicates things. And just for the record, I think between DISPEC and HTTP RFCs there are some breakages, right? So we don't. The one thing that comes into mind is the range, for example, the range parameters that we use, right? So there is a breakage. We sort of diverge already, and I don't know if that is a good argument on supporting this. For me, the vote is no. I definitely don't want to support this.
So Tina, I think you had the objection. What thoughts do you have on this?
I wouldn't look at mine as an objection so much as Chesterton's fence. Like, these parameters exist in the standard for some purpose, and I am not familiar with that purpose or the use cases for parameters in the original RFC. And I think that we should make sure that we understand what their purpose was there before we decide that they don't apply to us.
Somewhere in here, I'm rereading it right now, but
Yeah, I know
there's
there's
a
a
reference
char
to
set
version.
example in the RFC itself. I'm thinking more of real world usage because the RFC was written probably predating real world usage of this thing. And so I wonder if there's some actual like rubber hits the road type usage of people finding this useful or not useful that we could point to as justification for us either accepting it or denying it.
One of my big use cases is if you look at their list of all media types, they don't include parameters in here. They're saying this is the media type, that's it. And this is their entire document of all the media types that have been registered. So not a single registered media type here had a parameter on it.
So I guess one of the arguments we're making is that if you want to have a version 2 of your artifact type, you should register again with IANA.
If you're registering. But I mean, even like Moby.1.2 right there. Access to instead of just access. So people put version numbers in there, but they didn't put parameters in here. And I think that's kind of their concept, was that the parameter wasn't really the media type. It was just added information for the media type.
Right, such as versioning.
Yeah. Which they did specifically say it in here, which gets confusing. Because folks were reading this and they saw something about the version in there and they said, okay, well, since they told us to use parameters for the versioning, we should do that. I think they're reading this section in here. So for myself, I kind of agree with Ram and Sajid on this one, that I really hope nobody ever tries to use that. And for me, it'll be a lot easier if our spec just said, don't do that. Of course, now I'm reading Wikipedia articles, so pardon me for the silence here. But exactly what Sajid is saying in the comments, you could have someone saying, hey, I've got a character set for UTF-8 done at version 1.0. One of those is important, one of those is not, because everything we do is supposed to be UTF-8. The version number will be important, though.
I'm glad of registry operators can support basic filtering, if you start with there. But if the spec keeps on increasing in scope, then we lose the opportunity to land something consistent over time. But your point seems valid. We should at least call out why we are not honoring that, even though it's there in the spec. We've always been wavering on the edge, right? With the RFCs, it's like, yes, there is an RFC, but we're not going to tell you exactly how to interpret it.
Kind of why I liked putting a regex in here, saying this is it, exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, and that wavering on the edge of the RFC is why I linked to my SpongeBob example, where I've SpongeBobbed the media types, which is technically valid, but also technically not going to work in most implementations today because they're doing a string match.
I did specifically go through, and anywhere I have a header, I am parsing on my side, lowercasing it, stripping off parameters. But that's for headers. That's not for the media type inside the file itself. All right. Any more discussion we need on this one? Anyone else have thoughts? Okay, the other one I think would be really quick. Might be an easier one to chat about. Is someone wanted TOML support. And I think both Tina and I were both somewhat knack soft decline. It's just been sitting out there though for almost a year. Should we close this one out?
Yes.
That's easy. I just wanted to reconfirm with the group before I click the button.
Yeah, I was hoping putting soft knack would encourage more justification as to why we should maintain this markup. And
I think the fact that the TOML parser will automatically pull in the fields as they are makes that a whole lot easier.
yeah, and my concern is that today it's TOML. What's next? Someone who
Yeah.
wants INI, someone who wants SQL, like this feels like a never-ending list. And really it's a deficiency in Go itself that these can't be added by an external consumer of this library.
Or to make a universal tag that's just like whatever markup can pick from this, and maybe you have a specific one for JSON, a specific one for TOML or XML or whatever, but have the generic universal one up top. That would have been nice.
It all depends on the library that you are compiling in, right? So whatever interprets the tags. I know of, let me just paste.
Not sure if you cut out there or something wrong.
So this family of libraries actually has support for multiple things, and they use something called map structure as their tag type. So that takes care of Go and JSON and TOML and YAML and all of that stuff right there. Second line, second bullet point. So right, so this library has a tag called map structure, and as soon as you do that, I think it handles all of this automatically instead of JSON, which is internal to Go.
So does that mean, do they have an example down here somewhere in the struct?
Yeah, let me see if I can find an example for you.
See, I see the sets. I'm looking for like a Go struct somewhere. That wouldn't help for parsing JSON stuff. You would need another parser.
Yes,
Well,
yes, you will.
the
Yes,
default
that's
JSON
the
parser.
problem. Yeah, it's not a solution. I'm just giving you an.
Yeah.
For this particular problem, this is not a
Oh,
solution.
I
Because you
saw
have
it.
to compile this in.
There it is. So they have
Yeah,
their
very
own
good.
special
Yes.
tag in there for this. So
Yeah. But that
And that-
means you have to pull this guy in. So
yeah, that would have been nice. Sadly, I think we're a little bit too late to try to make that change. Although there is V2 on JSON that they're working on, so maybe it's not too late.
So I guess the objection was from container DC. For example, Tom said if they're willing to pull this in and make changes, then maybe upstream we do the same thing. And therefore, there is a way to unify this. But that's one approach. The other, I can definitely see why these requirements are coming in, right? So for example, JSON will not support comments, YAML does, and so on and so forth. So different projects may have taken up different markup languages for their configuration. So I see why it would diverge, but there is this difficulty.
Yeah.
And this was only on the platform struct. My guess is this is because we use TOML and containerd for our configuration, and then we subsequently convert it to the image because we use the image spec objects internally. So yeah, it's just an extra copy of from one type to another, I guess, that this would save.
Once we do it for one field, the people want for all the fields.
And
Yeah, that's exactly.
in this case, I think JSON makes sense for us to specify because the canonical representation of this object is JSON.
Yep.
This Go struct exists as a representation of that JSON document.
We use it
Yeah.
that way everywhere, so made sense to me too.
And we tried to distinguish a little bit more on the containerd side since then that, you know, there's some internal representations of strings that we use for configuration or the CLI that don't necessarily need to be OCI as long as they're not something that's sent over. Like TOML is not like it's something that's going to be in the containerd configuration, but it's not something that we expect to send up to a registry or something. So it really doesn't need to be in OCI. Like if Podman or some other container runtime wants to do the same thing, they can, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not really a compatibility issue.
All right. So that one, quick click of the no. And I think we're done with that one. Unless anybody else really wants to chat about it. I did have a couple for the distribution spec. This one I think is easy. It's just changing an order in the table of contents. I think they wanted to keep the notation up top and then the use cases a little bit under that. So I didn't have any objection to that. I think we do that in other places. And so it was just kind of standardizing the order.
Even if it doesn't match what's below in the rest of the spec. I thought the ordering was kind of went along with the order in which they appear later on.
Let's find out. As we're talking notation and then use cases, thought. Notation and then use cases. So they are making it match the order.
Okay, well then that's a simple yes. Yeah.
I like simple yeses. That's the reason I go back to some of these old ones. All right, I think that would solve that one. Content type header was the other one here. And that's in the notes, but I can also drop it in the chat if that helps you out. This is the other one that I threw over there from distribution spec, which there was a request of whether or not we must include the content type header when we talk to a registry. Changing a should to a must. That always gets me a little nervous. So my big question was, are there major registries that already require this? Or are there clients that don't? So this one is actually, see, Troy, doing a good job with the notes here, so I'll copy this link over here for you. Or no, you got the right one, sorry. So this was whether or not we should change it. And so my big question was, hey, are there registries out there that do this? Are there clients that will be broken by this? Because the phrasing they were trying to change was that a client that is pushing a manifest must set the content type header.
Why though? I'm reading the description, but I don't see the why. A clear why.
I think the why they were coming up with was that there were scenarios where the manifest itself should include a media type, but it doesn't necessarily. And a client should push a content type header, but doesn't necessarily. And when neither of those happens, then you get a undefined behavior of how do you parse that manifest.
Yeah, but I would think that the header would be not the place you would put a must there, just because it's not part of the actual content. Like the content should be self-descriptive, and header that makes it sound like the header should be trusted more than the description of the content, which I don't think is true.
I think the challenge of changing it to a must on the content is that there already is content out there today.
I'm not suggesting we should change it to a must. I'm just saying changing this to a must, I don't think is a good idea. We could decide that the registry may air out there, which I think they already can and probably do.
And in the spec language, a should is effectively a must, right? It's almost the same thing. What it's saying is, unless you have a really good reason not to, you should do this. So if you're writing a brand new client today, it should be setting the content type header. And if it's not, you better be ready to justify why you think you're exempt from that.
Or be prepared for registries that'll just reject the content.
Exactly, yeah. Because should is the knob we have to try and change behavior over time to the desired or better behavior.
Yeah, and I think the desired better behavior would be putting it in the content itself.
Yeah, which we already did, right?
We
Wasn't that
made
the
a
whole
should.
point of John's CVE?
Yeah, I think we made a should.
I mean, we can say they must match if they're both provided, but if neither are provided, then it's up to the registry.
Yeah.
Or reference media type over here, this property should be used. And I think the reason that had been said, I wasn't there for that one. But I would imagine the reason that we made that should is because there was already content out there that had been previously uploaded to registries.
Yeah, I do remember look, did we include it in schema 2 that this was based off of? I don't know if there was a media type there.
Asking like schema version must be set to 2.
Yeah, but the original Docker media type, I'm not sure if
Oh.
we always included it.
I'd have to look. I don't remember. if
But
it
yeah,
was in
either
there.
way, I mean, you're right. It's like there's content that we're trying to be backwards compatible. If the content exists, we should support it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a like problem here. Like maybe there's some ambiguity of as a registry, should I air out or what should I do here? But I don't think it calls for a spec change.
I just reread this text there and thinking that part of the question was, hey, if there are registries out there that don't enforce this, I'm thinking what we're saying here is registries can't enforce if they wanted to. All right, take care, Sajay. All right, that was everything that threw on the agenda. I'm going to put this one down as a knack from the group here. And we discussed it and turned it down. Anything else folks want to chat about?
I'm still rebasing the mirroring one. I thought it was going to be a quick rebase, but no, it's a bit more involved.
Yes, that's the one, Jory.
Yeah, I'm trying to take some of the advice that we talked about last week for updating the top section. Maybe we can discuss it next week.
You did ask the question and ping me on the side there, Derek, about whether we needed to have maintainer approvals like majority or supermajority for these things. And I felt like that was a good enough discussion. We can bring that up here too. Any objection chat about that right now?
Yeah, our governance on it's kind of weak, I would say. I mean, the problem is, the problem is like we have a mix of changes that are just kind of superficial in nature or related to, say, the conformance testing, which aren't really controversial. It's more just code. But then there's another category of these are actual changes to the spec. And I would think that we would treat changes to the spec like actual language changes. So like changing them, changing from a should to a must, or adding new sections, adding new endpoints as warranting a majority vote rather than just a 2 LGTM, like, oh, the code looks good. Kind of like maybe if we've already agreed to add something as maintainers, then 2 LGTM to get the change in. But how we actually treat like changes to the spec. And I'm not saying it's a problem. It's just in the past I'd put up like a vote for some of the changes just to get a majority in, but we don't really have like governance around that. So it's kind of up to maintainer discretion, I guess.
I've probably been playing fast and loose since I was not around for some of those earlier discussions. And so when the GitHub tells me that it only needs 2, I just click the merge button when we get 2 people on it. And I was always assuming that the circuit breaker would be at the end when we had to tag a release, where that's when the governance kicks in and says you needed the majority or the 2/3 vote at that point. Just in case someone wasn't around earlier to see something, but raised a good question. So if other people have opinions, chime in.
I mean, the same could be said like if we opened up a change to the governance file, 2 people LGTM it, we merge it. I would say, well, no, you can't just change the governance with 2 people. So it's kind of like there's what's written, there's the words that are there, and then there's like the meaning behind them, in some of them. So I don't know. That wasn't necessarily like a disagreement. It was more like the tag listing. Hey, we had 2 LGTMs on it. It's like, should we just merge it, or should we put up a list vote to say, hey, here's who's approved it so far? And I'm fine that we just merge it because it's a clear one, but
I'm going back to the governance document right now just to see, because we define what voting is, but I'm looking to see if we define what needs to be voted on.
yeah, it wasn't super clear.
Maybe I should put up a BR for the governance document for that. Merge with 2 votes.
Yeah, merge with 2 votes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the whole GitHub thing is like, what number do you force it? Force like a minimum to look at, but don't really have a maximum. Like on Containerd, we purposely like did not set a like number because every change is different. Like if this change touches 3 different components, and there's 3 different people who are expert in those components, and you want ideally somebody from each of those components that can LGTM it. But if it's just something simple, then it's a minimum. But yeah, I think especially on a spec, it's better to have it be more clear, because otherwise yeah, something goes in, someone says, hey, that didn't get like a majority approval, and yeah, I don't want to wait until the release to start talking about whether or not something should have been in.
Historically, have there been big delays at release for this reason? Because maybe something popped in that someone didn't notice, or, you know, has this been something that's slowed you all down in the past?
I think just the last release, I wouldn't say it was because of this issue in particular, but maybe toward the end, yeah, there was disagreement on stuff that was merged, say, much earlier, but folks basically didn't look at everything until the end, including myself. So it's like once looking at it, the whole picture at the end, then there was a long delay. Whereas ideally stuff would get kind of maintainer approval for each individual spec change. And I know it's different, like the 1.1 was kind of a larger release than maybe we should have done. Like maybe stuff, ideally, like if it's not a major release, we release more often with smaller changes, but it was just a big chunk that had a long history that kind of let it in. So I don't know if that's probably more of an anomaly than anything else, but I would think that the changes that go into the next minor releases are small enough that we could just maybe consider that at release time, or maybe we just have it looked at individually if there's not that many. It's definitely overwhelming for me to like look at like 100 changes that went into a spec for a release and try to go and pick out the ones that I don't agree with and then reopen a discussion.
Kind of curious if Dion or Brian have thoughts on that one, because it crosses multiple specs. Of course, calling him out for that case that was missed, in case you were like, oh no, he called my name. We're chatting about whether each change to the spec, each PR being pushed to the spec, where is the line between whether it's just a 2 maintainer approval versus a quorum of 2/3 to merge a PR?
Yeah, that's something we've struggled with a lot.
Or maybe just a simple majority. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you could see like 2 maintainers who agree with something, add something, and then 2 maintainers who disagree with it, remove it, and then you end up with this like weird back and forth. I'm not saying that's going to happen because we're mature adults, but like
Hey, speak
just
for
from
yourself.
like but from like a rules perspective, oh, if you have a majority, a simple majority, then you don't have like kind of that back and forth of like, oh, this is what majority wants, this is what a majority doesn't want. Obviously, like if there's not 2/3, then it's going to be a problem later on. But
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it was Jory's point, the way this typically exhibits is not by change wars where we go back and forth, but by delays during release where we have a big change that some subset of maintainers disagree with strongly enough to block the release. And then we have to resolve that deadlock somehow.
And I would say that I think most projects tend to prefer that releases are non-issues, right? That like, that by the time we're at that point, there's not a lot of surprises. But of course, every group of stakeholders are different. And so, if this is something where it doesn't historically take you long to, even if there were surprises about what was or wasn't included in a release, if it doesn't take you too much time and it's not too disruptive, then, maybe that's fine. But on the other hand, if you wanted to kind of shift a little bit to more incremental releases, and you wanted to maybe think a little bit more agilely about what is a substantive spec change that really does require all those different folks who have a stake in it to have said, yes, cool, on it, or this is a material, it's, non-normative, it's a typo, we changed the order of the table of contents, that kind of thing. You don't want to hold that up by requiring 2/3 of maintainers who are busy to, probably +1, that kind of thing. So I wonder if you have a clear sense already of like what constitutes substance versus is non-controversial and will be, noise, frankly, for maintainers if you go ask them for +1s.
I think some of this also goes back to we've had a lack of maintainer involvement. Just in general, some of these PRs we're talking about now have been sitting out there for a long time, and it just takes time to get maintainers to look at things. And often the point that maintainers look at things is when we're going for that quorum call to get a release. And so that means that sometimes an issue might have taken that long to finally be discovered, just because people hadn't been paying attention. It also kind of has the flip side of how difficult is it to do the day-to-day operations if we're always looking for trying to get a quorum on normal PRs before tagging release. So
I mean, I would say like 90% probably wouldn't fall into that substantive category that Jory's talking about. And the reason why I mentioned the list is because the reason I use the list is because you at every maintainer, and it's very easy to track and ping the ones who haven't voted on it yet. I mean, my impression is like, okay, if we want to do a 1.2 release, there was the tag 1, maybe the mirror, maybe that's all we want to get in the release. It's like maybe 2 over like a 6-month period. It's not like a huge, it's not like a huge burden. But yeah, I agree. Like we wouldn't do that for most normal release or most normal pull requests.
So Mike, I feel like we started chatting about the topic that you might want to chat about. So the discussion we were just on was when we have a normal PR going out there, GitHub has you locked down to requiring 2 maintainers to approve. And are there scenarios where we want that to be a higher threshold to get a majority or a quorum of maintainers for certain kinds of PRs that are being looked at?
By default, any breaking change, right? Minor extensions, no. I mean, that's generally how we work, across the other open source projects. Don't break anything.
Everything's a
Well,
breaking change.
Yeah, I would say breaking change would be even different.
Yeah. It's also always appropriate to make sure that the maintainers, they're used to you doing the reviews in a particular section or modified at last, are also included in the, as a please look at this kind of thing, given their availability, right?
I mean, you could also do like a 7-day period and say if there's no one rejects, like if anybody rejects, then it'd force a quorum vote.
That helps a lot, Derek. Just the, you know, the concept of slow down just a little bit to give other people the opportunity to take a look, rather than it goes in, 2 people said yes, merge. I mean, that could be in 5 minutes, and that's not necessarily the best way to merge things, right? And because then you got to go back and revert it, and you feel like you're embarrassing somebody when you revert, or you're not, you know, the social interaction was missed. But, you know, little things like we're fixing a test case, that should never require, you know, a whole bunch of people. So it depends. I don't know.
I always think the burden is on the person who clicks the merge button. Shouldn't, like, if you,
Yep.
before you click that merge button, you should know whether or not the right people have reviewed it and whether it falls into that category.
Right.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
I click that button as soon as it turns color.
I do
That's
know
like,
of-
it has to be a robot then, Brandon.
there are certainly lots of groups that do have that sort of requirement of PR must be open 7 days and have X many, you know, +1s. And that seems to be non-controversial as well as.
And also recognize, Jory, here that in our case, these are modifications to the next version of the specification. It's not really a live version, right? So we've got that additional, and you can still review it later on and modify and, you know, revert until it's been released, right, as a spec version.
That's where you showed up late, Mike. We were just talking about, do we want to consider these kind of as they come in, or potentially, like, today it's like you vote on the release and that's it. But, you know, some releases it's not that big of a deal, but others, if there's like 100 changes, like what?
Right. Also, it's timing related. Generally, in most of our open source projects, we have a live community. People know somebody's on vacation, so they may delay a vote, right? Kind of thing. But here in this group, we may not know when people are on vacation or not. Uh-oh.
I'm just thinking that we actually did have 4 maintainers approving this one, so that I think that's probably the quorum already there. But tag pagination was breaking. We went back and forth with that one a whole bunch to sort out getting that to the right point. And I probably would have done that with just 2 maintainers plus me, as long as there was enough discussion on that one, because that one was open for a lot longer than 7 days.
Right, opened in September, right? The final version of the change was merged within, what was it, April 4th through?
So I guess the difference there is, I would say after the button goes green, maybe send a comment to say, hey, let's hold this one open until we're going to merge this on this date. If anybody has any thing, and then do that. But yeah, I'm not saying that there was a problem with the tag pagination. I just messaged you because at that point, we had 2 plus you, so 3. And I was gonna make a list, but I wasn't sure. But yeah, if we want to add some process there, and if it times out, I think that's fine too.
I am not at all worried about us making a decision in less than 7 days around here. We're pretty good about not doing that.
Not for new, interesting, or breaking changes. Those are definitely, or potentially breaking.
And
yeah.
Thinking of the registry proxy one that started this, I think that's a big enough change that for me as a maintainer to put my check on that one, I would be looking for some implementations out there that were trying to do it, because it feels like a bigger change to me.
So a new label that describes the length of time or the size of, or, boat required kind of labels, that we could add a couple of labels. I should handle it.
I think maybe part of what I'm hearing Derek say too is just like a little bit, maybe the existing process is fine, but just like a tiny bit more clarity on, and if a label helps with that, yeah, then.
Right. Yeah, we could just write in there, somewhere in the contribution guide or something about what these new labels would mean, and then we can just tag it. It allows any maintainer to tag it without editing the PR owner's text to add, or some kind of hold or something. You can always hold a PR if you want, right, with the rejection, but if not everybody that might reject has looked at it, then that's sort of a problem here, right? Interesting. All right, the change to governance. All right, right.
Ship it.
Ship it. I'll approve.
Yeah, and on the registry one, there was a case of like, even after approval, I didn't want to necessarily merge it directly, because there's that whole thing of, yeah, I want some either registry operators or people who've been asking for this feature to go implement it, and for them to be able to look at it and say, hey, the maintainers have approved this. We haven't put it in a release yet. But like, I feel comfortable going and doing that.
We could add a label as well, right there to a merge of a PR that requires additional discussion before release.
Yeah, and this was pre-working group days when this was added. I'm not saying that it warrants a working group, but like,
right,
just that whole process of getting buy-in from external implementers as well.
Yeah, because I gotta say, when we did the last, it took days to go through every single pull request. There was every commit that was added to the release. I was starting to feel a little weird. Do I just approve this, or do I got to go through them all? And I did. It took a while, but if there was one or two that were already flagged in there for may need additional review before release, then we could focus on those items a little bit more, while allowing the merge to happen in the meantime.
I'm impressed you went through the individual commits. I only look at the final files changed at the end.
Yeah, in the end, it's all a list of commits, right?
Feel like in the end, people only care about what's in the spec at that final point. They're not looking through the whole history. A lot of times it's good to do, but most of us don't.
If you're looking at it and there was a delete, how do you know it's gone? You know what I'm saying?
Yep. All right. Well, we ran the hour out there.
All right.
Any last thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I'm getting some more discussions around the concept of what is a pod in the OCI context. And I know OCI is being used by the Red Hat cost people to specify a bootable image, either bare metal or in a VM, to run a container operating system. That's what cost stands for in this particular context. Just a heads up. I mean, people want to use OCI for a lot more than just container images. And Brandon, this one's for you. Well, I mean, and Derek, they want to be able to mount as a volume these artifacts into a pod so that it can be accessible from a container. Okay.
Feels like the WASM discussion I was having last week.
Maybe, but no, this fork came in through the Red Hat guys. They were like, hey, let's do a cap and Kubernetes to figure out how we can mount. Of course we can just mount any volume and we could just extract the artifact to a particular location, but it's only using OCI as a way to get another file to mount as volume inside the container or a pod, right? At some point in time, we're gonna need to have that additional manifest type or that discussion about what is a pod in the context, I think, of OCI. I don't think we need to own what a pod spec definition is, but we might need to own something about, artifacts that are shared across a set of containers, or what is a set of containers in the OCI context. Okay. Possibly even, what if it's not an image? What if it's a boot? Or an application that gets installed like RPM, hint. Maybe OCI is going to start becoming a way to do packages with SBOMs in a common way. All right. OCI could expand a lot more if we start getting interested in how people are using it. Just sort of a heads.
There was an attempt to try to standardize how SBOMs and other things are pushed.
They're
that got
getting
pushed back on a long time
closer.
ago.
They're getting a lot closer on having. I've been working with the OSSF guys around SBOM tools and libraries to normalize how SBOMs are defined and provide a CLI for us to be able to actually see what are the licenses that are in this container, that sort of thing. We're going to be able to do that fairly soon, and we should be able to add it to the container runtimes if needed.
Sounds like a good opportunity to open up a couple of issues to start tracking the thoughts on that. Saeed, I'm going to give you a last word.
Yeah, you mentioned Red Hat and the artifact stuff. So yes, we are we're looking at not just bootable images, but a lot more. So I am in talks with other folks who are, for example, trying to push AI models to an OCI registry. That's the hot topic these days, like AI everywhere. So training data, trained models, parameters, all of those. So I think this artifact, OCI 1.1 artifact suggestion is what's driving all of this.
And so instead of a data image that you mount in the pod, you would have on certain nodes, you would have instead, you're saying an artifact that would be stored locally and mounted depending on the workload.
Sounds like we're talking about making like a layer artifact or a directory artifact.
Is it a layer? Yeah.
Not really a layer so much, but a directory artifact of some kind.
That's whatever. It's the same difference, right?
Yeah. We're way over right now, so I think a good topic to open up an issue or throw it on the agenda for next week, and let's dig into it.
See, if it's a set of layers, if an order matters, we might have an issue there.
Yep. Good topic for next time.
All right.
Have a great rest of the week, everybody.
Hit me on Slack, and I'll hook you up with the other Red Hatter that was asking for these kinds of changes.
Get a good issue or discussion started, and we'll go with that.
All right, we can do that.
All right.
It's a few issues. All right, take care.
Okay.
Take
Have
care.
a good one.